Yeah, and just take a look at the economy as well. And of course, we don't forget we do have this RBI rate decision coming up this week. We've got the unemployment rate in the country climbing to a one-year high in August. Now, this is all according to data from the private research firm CMIE. Now, this is coming against this backdrop of other economic indicators showing signs of recovery. Our next guest is a non-executive chairman of India's largest staffing company, Quess Corporation, and joining us now from Bengaluru for an exclusive interview is Ajit Isaac. Ajit, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, those two things seem to be contradictory, that you've got unemployment going up as the economy seems to be gathering steam. Is there something going on structurally with a change in the employment situation in India?
Well, for one, the data seems to suggest that the worst is over for India in terms of unemployment. If Quess's numbers are any indication, we are the largest multi-sector domestic employer in India. We employed about 380,000 people prior to the pandemic. We lost 90,000 people in the pandemic, so we lost about 1/4 of our workforce. But today we are back to about 470 to 480,000. We've added back another quarter to the number that was there before the pandemic. So if that's any number to go by, I think we are out of the woods in terms of employment. Also, other high-frequency data suggests that India's economy is progressing ahead. We've got sales tax and GST collections going up. We've got highway tolls going up. We've got income tax collections going up. All indicators of positive growth on the economic front. So I think we should expect the Indian employment market to look a lot better coming up.
So that brings me nicely, Ajit, to talk about who is hiring. What kind of industries are at the moment more buoyant than others? Who are then shedding staff too?
So we're clearly seeing employment coming back in retail, banking and financial services, hospitality and tourism. Tourist inflows are picking up again in India. So we expect to see the services sector looking up. Services employs right now, anywhere from about 30 to 40% of the workforce. So we expect that to look up a lot. We also expect some shedding to take place in manufacturing, because that's going to be linked to productivity, not because there is production capacities coming down. Also, with the festive season around the corner in India, we expect e-commerce companies to do a lot more hiring. So this is sort of the broad spectrum of who's going to hire and where we could lose a bit.
Ajit, every worker wondering what about wage increases when they're facing high prices. What sort of impact do you see on wages?
So during the pandemic, we had a lot of belt tightening in terms of costs. Labor costs are a significant part of overall input costs in India. And with inflation going up between 7 and 8% or so, labor costs only kept pace with it. Wage inflation was equal to actual real inflation. But what is expected to happen in the next year is that we think that labor costs will go up in the double digits, between 10 and 12%. Inflation will drop down and tail off a little bit to about 6 to 7%. So real increase in salaries will happen from next year.
And in terms of what we're also seeing with youth employment, what kind of things can be done by the government and by businesses to ensure that more young people do enter the workforce?
So there are certain structural changes taking place in the Indian labor market, so to say. The first one is that there is a movement from the farm to the non-farm sector. And that's a big movement, because 40% of the total workforce today is in the farm sector. And we expect that to move into a large part of that to move into the non-farm sector. The second one is the movement from the rural to the urban, and that's sort of a consequence of the first point that I made. Total migratory workforce is expected to be about 120 million in India. We expect that to go up by at least about 10 to 15% every year from now for the next 4 to 5 years. The third major structural change happening in the labor market is the movement from the informal to the formal sector. Only about 1/4 of the Indian workforce of about 500 million have contracts with defined benefits, social security, cover, etc. So we expect that number to go up. That structural shift is a big one. The fourth one is the movement from unstructured, employers to employers in the structured segment, where taxes are paid, contracts are given, etc. And lastly, from the conventional economy to the digital economy. So these are sort of the 5 changes that are taking place. And for overseas companies coming to make an investment in India, it's good for them to calibrate some of these into their business plans. But we think that these are a big tailwind, major structural benefits to the employment industry in India. So for companies like us that are in the staffing space, we think these are big impact issues.
Just very, very quickly here, are jobs for the huge number of young people in India enough?
So about 10 million people join the workforce every year. The number of jobs being created in India is not yet of the order to absorb this workforce, and that's why we find unemployment going up. I think what will also happen now is with increased emphasis in healthcare, increased emphasis on education, and the electronic sector, we've seen significant investments come into the electronic sector. That ecosystem is going to look up along with the set of suppliers in that segment. So companies like Dell, Wistron, Foxconn, Samsung, etc., adding capacities to, essentially the phone and the handheld segment. We think that that will, inch up employment in India, and that's going to be the key in getting younger people employed and not staying in houses. Also, the movement away from farm to non-farm will ensure that people come out of agricultural settings, join urban, agglomerations, and then find employment there.
Ajit, thank you so much for joining us. Ajit Isaac, the Quess Corporation Non-Executive Chairman. Well, while we've been on air, we've just seen Indian markets open, and to the